This is Pick Up the Mic podcast on WWMVLP 95.5 and Radio 22. This is Pick Up the Mic podcast. I'll be your host, Corey Whitmore. This podcast aims to bring new voices into the conversation about how to eliminate racial disparities in education in the Madison Metropolitan School District. Over the past couple of months, we've had numerous interviews with African-American high school juniors and seniors, principals, teachers, mental health therapists to give us more perspective on how we start this conversation and how we find potential solutions. Here in episode 6, we are going to talk about community and what is their role in helping to close this achievement gap. When I think about community, there's a quote that comes up in my mind that I heard multiple times when I was younger. And that quote goes like this: "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." And I believe that quote's from Margaret Wheatley. When we move through this episode, we are going to talk about the power community has and what are some of those things that community can do to help close this achievement gap. The students we interviewed felt very passionately about community centers and what role they can play. And I'll let them get into some of the nuances of things that they were looking for from local community centers. Our community leaders, while supporting everything that the students were saying, came at it in a different way. And I think what you're going to find with this particular topic is that there is no single clear solution. There are a number of things and a number of roles community can play. And we'll bring some of those up. Like I said, the students will give their point of view, communities will give their point of view. And there's a great article talking about 10 ways communities can help close the gap, I believe from Education Post, an online publication. So it's good as you listen to be mindful of these different options. But I really do think it's going to be a matter of priority as far as what are we going to really push community to do first and foremost to try and help close this gap. I do want people to also realize that in trying to close this gap, we need change in both areas. So far in the podcast, we focused on change at the schools. What type of environment can they provide? Are these tests truly good evaluators and indicators? Understanding what are the things going on outside of the curriculum that could be influencing scores and attendance, and the importance of having teachers inside those walls that reflect who you are and your culture. But we can't have change in one and not change in the other. I believe change is needed not only in aspects of the school system, but also in the community and what their role is going to be as well. So let's go ahead and let's jump into our interviews with the students and see what they have to say. And the question that I posed to them is, what role can community play in helping to close this achievement gap? And here's what they had to say.
I think that the community can help by I feel like parents don't take PTO meetings and coming in and talking to other parents as serious as they should, because another parent will never know what another Black student has went through that class if they don't talk to the parent and, listen to other issues. And based off other issues, all the parents could get together and they could have been went to talk to somebody way higher at the top of all of this and let them know these issues are going on. There's not been a change in things like this. The community isn't really too looped into the schools. So right. And I said, there are students who don't have support that they could have from, because they're not getting it from the inside. have it from the outside, so they just stop doing stuff. They stop showing up for classes. They don't go to practice anymore.
Yeah, like Bill said, like I've been a part of like a lot of programs and like an internship like with like things in the community. So I definitely think they're doing something. But I think the best thing the community can do is like provide resources to our school, because like we are a public school. So it's like all the money that Madison gets, it gets divided by like 6 different high schools versus like some Prairie where it's kind of like just one. So I think like if the community like could partner with our school to like provide like mentoring programs, like stuff like that with professionals in the community, I think that's something.
So I'm a part of like a like volunteer program through Boys and Girls Club called Keystone Club. And while I was doing research, I saw that like there was like plans to have like a community center like I would say like a couple blocks from Leopold Elementary School. And obviously like that hasn't happened, and I think it was supposed to be built either like last summer or the summer before that. And so I think it would be really nice to have like a community space where people feel safe, but where they can also like get work done and like be productive and learn things that they might not have been able to learn, especially if they like have a home life where like they're not able to do that at home, but then they could have a community space where they could do that in hopes of making the achievement gap smaller rather than wider.
I feel like I said before, just coming together as one. And not just 100 Black men, just people that are like, successful in general, like women who are in, certain type of fields that other girls like my age think that they probably can't get into because they're Black and they're a woman. Just to give like hope and inspiration. I feel like that is what would unite us better if we knew the possibilities to being successful.
The community is very important. I feel people often underestimate just the power that other people have. I think if people in the community, especially prominent people, maybe with a little bit more money, could set up programs. And it's really just about trying to invest in the kids' education, because instead of having a kid go, home straight from school, maybe like playing video games, not doing homework, like there's a community center like where they can get help, and it's people who look like them that they're not scared to ask. And I feel like we as a community should see this, the achievement gap, and be like, okay, so we're looking at all these problems, so what can we do? We could try to find find scholarships for students who want to go to college, and maybe do teaching, like scholarships for like Black people of color who want to become teachers in Madison, and things like that, and raise awareness.
So like Sierra said, I think community centers is like the key thing to closing the achievement gap, because personally I've been going to a community center since I was like 5 years old, like consistent. And without being there, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I have today. Because like, for example, like during sophomore year, I started going to the community center like every other Saturday for like ACT practice. Without being pushed to, and I've been consistently doing that up to till I took the ACT. So without being pushed to go to the community center every other Saturday to practice for the ACT, I would have never done that on my own. So I think community centers are like they're undervalued. Like people think like whatever of them. Like
So I'm hearing a couple of things from at least this first set of interviews from the students. One, talking about parents and teachers, parents getting more involved in teacher conferences, and I would add into that attending school board meetings and seeing what are the changes that are happening and things that are going on. So I am hearing parent involvement. I'm hearing a better relationship possibly between the district and African American led organizations. I'm hearing that. in which students can see people in their community and understand what it is that they're doing, and possibly be able to build a relationship with these people that come in to speak. And one young lady was talking about 100 men and how that impacted her, and when they came in to speak, and she just wanted to hear more and have more people come in to see what are the opportunities, what are the possibilities for me within my own community. So that partnership, and that may not be solely on the district, that may also be on organizations and businesses like mine, to say, hey, I'm willing to come in and speak to the kids and talk about what I do and provide internship opportunities. So that may be something that's not solely on the district, but on the surrounding community, to let people know, hey, I am here. I do have the time. I have the interest in wanting to build a relationship with these kids and talk about what it is that I do or what it is that I'm a part of. So I'd heard that. And then lastly, we heard about community centers. You know, like I said, I've been back to the area for about 5 years here, and of course I work at the Lucia Community Education Center, so that's a community center right there. I've spent summers over at Warner Park in a partnership with the Madison Public Library, and you know I've been out to Middleton at Clark Street for after school stuff. I've been to Elver and doing a music production class down at the Elver Park Neighborhood Community Center. So there are plenty of community centers around here doing incredible work. I do wonder sometimes if they are communicating well with each other. If one community center has this type of facility, is that being offered to other community centers that may not have those facilities? When I was working at the Boys and Girls Club in Milwaukee, you know, we were one of 2 clubs that had a operating music studio, full music studio. People can come in and record and create. And I believe that we should have done a better job of communicating to surrounding neighborhood community centers to say, hey, do you have kids that are interested in music production or learning to record? When can we get them into our center? Because we have these type of resources. So I do think that there's intercommunication that can happen between community centers that may give a fuller experience for the kids that attend those community centers. They can offer and provide more things because they've built a relationship with other community centers, and we can go there to use this, and they can come here to use that, and they can borrow this, and we can help to run that. So I do believe that is something that, you know, we may want to look into and see if, you know, we can build a better network between community centers. We're all looking to try and do the same thing and have a similar impact. There should be no reason why, you know, we can't forge those relationships and work together. And I know some community centers are already doing that, and I give them props for what they have done, and I hope they continue to do it. But I do know that some community centers can try and communicate a little bit more and a little bit better between each other. So we're going to take a quick break. We are going to jump back into more student interviews right after this. Welcome back. This is Pick Up the Mic podcast with your host, Corey Whitmore. This is episode 6. We are talking about community. What is community's role in helping to close the achievement gap? We listened a little bit to our students in the first part. We are going to jump right back in, and they're going to tell us what they would like to see community do in helping to close the achievement gap.
I really like the idea of them mentioning just for teens, because I think that is a really important point, because I think that kind of turns a lot of people off, being like, well, I'm 17 and there's like, you know, a couple of 13-year-olds and like the rest are like 5. Like I don't, so you're in that space with your peers, people that you know that are around your age. You're getting to know the people that you're going to school with. I personally think having like mental health professionals there is great, especially if it could be free of cost to the families Because I personally, I have ADHD. And so I got admitted to UW. And so I'm trying to apply for accommodations for my ADHD because you have to let them know. And it's like, if you're undiagnosed, we have these partners that we work with that'll give you a discounted rate. And I'm like, if somebody can't afford healthcare in the first place, how are they able to afford to get an evaluation on top of just getting to go to college?
Right.
And they're getting an evaluation to see if there's anything that they need to become a better student. Because when you've lived with it all your life, you're like, oh, everybody does this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not true. I also think it's really important. I think we touched on this a little bit Wednesday, of how there's kind of this common myth in the Black community that mental health isn't real. It's for white people. It's just the devil getting in your mind, all things that I've heard. And so teens especially is kind of a good point when you're growing up, but who are dealing with things like depression, anxiety, and they don't feel like they can go to their families, and they know that they can't afford to be able to talk to someone. Because the thing is, the school counselors, they do what they have to do, but there are only like 4 of them at West for like 2,500 kids. They can't sit there and have in-depth conversations about what are happening in these kids' life, how to help them. Also recognizing signs of different things like, hey, you're saying that you're having a hard time reading. Have you been tested for dyslexia? We can do that. Things like that that have just gone overlooked.
Right.
I think that's really, really important. And I think that was a great idea. It just reminded me, my dad didn't graduate high school. He's from South Side Chicago. And he said, I always wished that there was like somewhere we could go, because we just went to school and went home, because the only other choice was to run on the street. And if you're on the street, there are drugs. So I wish that there was somewhere that we could go, that when I was having trouble with motivation, that somebody would have been able to help me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important.
I think it's a great idea. I think centers are like doing a decent job of trying to incorporate like high schoolers into their programs, but like for example, I've seen a center. It's not like the biggest community center. So like not kindergarten, it's like the middle schoolers and the elementary schoolers that go there, like all 3 of those age groups, like they all like integrate. So it's like, is a high schooler really going to want to go to a community center with a 10-year-old? But yeah, and like we also have to like share the computer lab, or like I know there's a TeenWorks program at Goodman, and they kind of have like their own space, since Goodman has 2 buildings.
Yeah.
That second building is kind of like dedicated to the teens. And I like the idea, especially the idea of having a mental health specialist there. Personally, I'm aware of like the mental health crisis in like the Black community, and I've also been looking into it. I've been looking to try to like major in psychology in college. So yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot that's already been said, like having a space for not only like kids of color to go. I feel like spaces like that exist, but the word isn't really spread out to families that have students of color. That makes sense. I feel like it's kind of limited to like, we're going to spread the information to these people. If these people find out, that's cool. But you know, it's limited information kind of put out there is kind of what I'm trying to say. And then not only just for like completing homework and like having a space, like safe space to go, I think there should be like a place where kids can go who are struggling with like mental health issues. Because I know there's a lot of like stuff out there about how important mental health is, but I feel like people don't talk about the mental health issues that specifically come with kids of color, high schools of color, because there's a lot of different stuff that we deal with and go through that really takes a toll on us that like white people wouldn't understand. And not a lot of people have not only the money to like get therapy or, you know, get one of those online counselors.
So thank you once again to the students. The students are incredible. and did an incredible job being forward and honest about what they felt they needed from the community. And these students focused on community centers, but not just that, we need more community centers, but what I found interesting was the cross section between community centers and the need for mental health to be within these community centers. I can speak from experience from my time in Milwaukee as a teen programs coordinator. Many times I was serving as coordinator, counselor, mental health specialist. In not all instances, but in many instances. And I never really realized that was a role I was playing until the teens in this podcast kind of indirectly pointed that out to me. That me sitting in the office, and I told them about this, and having kids come into the office and talk about what's happening at school and the things that are going on. I was basically serving almost as a counselor, and maybe not knowing that, but that was the role I was serving. They were coming in and talking about different things that were happening, whether it was at home, whether it was in school, and needed a place to vent and needed a safe space to be able to share those experiences. And maybe the reason behind this group of students, and they've mentioned another thing. We've talked about parent involvement, and we've talked about the need for community Black-led organizations to be more a part of the district in a multitude of ways. But they really hammered down on community center, but also that cross section of mental health and how important that is. So, I don't feel that should be something ignored, especially as we are hopefully, as things are going, we are trending away, are moving out of this pandemic, in which schools in the fall, they look to be like the majority of students are looking to go back for in-person learning, though I know that in some districts, virtual will still be an option. But there may be no more important time than right now to figure out how to fuse those two worlds of community center and therapy and mental health. There may be no more important time than right now. You can even look back to our episode in which we were talking about what the students are going through in the George Floyd, BLM, Trump era, and all of that trauma that is occurring. To be honest, I was woefully underqualified to be a counselor or a mental health therapist. That was not my training. That was not necessarily how I came into being placed in that position. But being in a lot of growing up in a lot of different areas and moving around and being in different school systems and being in places in which people that look like me were the majority, and other places where people that look like me are the minority, or I am the only person, the only Black student in the school. I've been there, so my experiences has built up a level of empathy where I can understand a lot of what the kids were going through when they were explaining it and talking about it because of my the different experiences that I've had. But there's no replacement, I believe, for a true expert that could possibly do a better job of meeting the kids' needs than what I can provide. I can provide a sympathetic ear. I can provide some possible solutions. But as far as working through the things that they're going through, pushing through that trauma, being able to constantly be able to follow up with them to see what's going on day to day, that was not something that I was consistently able to do. Because as a programs coordinator, my job is to manage and organize a number of different things. While being a sympathetic ear and a counselor and a person that can listen and give you a safe space is most definitely a part of my job description, it is not something that I can focus on. These kids today need someone that can focus on those things, focus on those issues within that community center, can make those calls, can coordinate those meetings with parents or with people in the school if that is needed. And I feel that may be what the students are getting to and are calling for. The pandemic has changed a lot, and we need to review some of the systems that I believe we've taken for granted as it's always been done this way. It's always been put together this way, because this group of kids have, while similar needs to kids before, have a new set of needs that are unique and a little different. And I think we need to be mindful of that and pay close attention to that. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this break, we are going to go to two of our community leaders and catch their perspective on what they feel the role community should play in helping to close this community gap. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Pick Up the Mic podcast with your host, Corey Whitmore. We are going to jump right into interviews with the community leaders. We are trying to figure out what is community's role in helping to close this achievement gap. They both add an interesting perspective, where we have Mrs. LaShawn Whitmore-Sells talking more about those community centers that the students have brought up that are so important, but feel that there are some added things that are needed within those centers. And then we'll also look at relationships between the district and the community, and how that can also be of importance in the role that community can play in helping to close this gap. So let's jump into those interviews.
Your community centers have a huge piece in communities. A lot of kids and families rely on them as an outlet for students to be able to go to. So kids spend a lot of time at community centers. And so knowing that they're spending a lot of time there, it really makes sense for it to have a connection to school. And what I mean by that is having some time when students arrive to be able to receive a meal or a snack, to be able to have access to internet, to be able to do homework or finish homework or get some extra support. Because this is a slightly different setting for them to be able to decompress. It's a place that they feel comfortable in. It's a place where they feel that there's non-judgment. So therefore, some of them are really able to dig deeper into their lesson or feel that they can infer that information. And I think it's also great for community centers to have different things like STEAM or STEM. Also to talk about technology. So things that can be cutting edge can happen at a community center, more play-based learning. And so I think, K through 12, it's a great opportunity for kids to learn from each other too. In a sense, the older kids can really give back to the younger kids to say, hey, this is what I'm working on, one of the things that one of the schools that I worked in, we worked on doing STEM, and it was really great to see the different projects students could do from elementary to high school. And it was amazing how the little guys were really learning from the older guys to try different projects and actually to partner in some cases with some of these projects, because, it's amazing once students are starting to do something that they're very excited about. It doesn't really matter the age. They may not understand all components, but the exposure is what's important for them. the exposure. So if they're trying to figure out how to make a car run, using batteries, it's really great for them to see, the little guys to see, oh, it really does matter how you put the battery in. If it's backwards, it won't run. If it's going in the right direction, it will run. So there are things that they're picking up and learning on with working with older students that they wouldn't get in school, per se. So I think it's a great opportunity because you don't have the constraints of, well, you're in first grade, you can't really work with a fourth grader, you know. And so I think community centers have access to that. And also there's some great grants out there for community centers to work collaboratively with schools or other places around expanding some of those things. And so I think sky's the limit for community centers. I know we don't have nearly enough in communities, but I think that there's an opportunity for there to be growth in the community centers. A lot of retired educators sometimes like to work in community centers to be able to have different hours. So for 2 hours I can give back to the community by working in a community center and helping students with literacy or helping them with math or science. Things of that nature. So I think there's great possibilities.
This is a really good question. And the reason that I say that this is a really good question is because it's kind of touchy for some people, right? Some people will say that it's the parents' responsibility. It's the parents' job to make sure their kids are acting this way or doing this or doing that or being this or being that. Man, I'm from this place. And I always grew up with it takes a village, right? It takes a village. It doesn't take one parent. We know that there's been families for years that have been single parented homes. There's been 2-parent homes. And I've seen single family homes do amazing things. And then I've seen 2-parent homes just like kids are just all over the place. Right. And this is where I say it takes a village because it's about relationships, right? My dissertation is titled African-American Males' Perspectives on Factors That Promote or Impede Academic Success in a Predominantly White High School. And one of the biggest, 2 of 3, I'll give you the top 3 things that played out. And one is staff to student relationships. 2, peer-to-peer relationships. And 3, student advocacy. And it wasn't in any order. Right. Those are the 3 things that played out hugely. And when you think about staff and student relationships, that has to be strong for there to be a sense of community role. And what I mean by that is, if I have an awesome, strong relationship with kids, that means that I can connect totally different to things that are happening in the community. I can connect totally different to the families, parents, differently than I would if I didn't have a relationship with a kid. Right. So now the community's focus and role in all of this is that they're connected to the school. They understand what's happening. They understand, what's coming up in the school. They're communicated with well from the school to stay abreast of things. There's systems in place that they can get involved with in the schools, right? And if those things aren't communicated well, if those things aren't laid out or designed well, then you start having people feel like people aren't being transparent. People aren't allowing me to be a part of my kids' education because I'm a boisterous individual that comes into the school and let people know how I feel about certain things that didn't go so well for my kid, or how a teacher may have responded to my kid. But we only allow, for some odd reason, man, families and the community to get involved when the poop hits the fan.
Right.
Right. And at that time, it's too late. It's too late because now it's a negative focus.
right,
as opposed to a positive focus? How do we positively include families and the community sooner and earlier? By making them aware of what's happening in the schools, how important education is to not only you as a parent, but how important it is to have the community involved, right? And what that may look like.
Thank you for that, Dr. Randy Briggs. Two great perspectives on community centers and what they can do and the role they can play and the different things that can occur within them, but also breaking it down to relationships. Dr. Randy Briggs spoke on staff to student relationships and peer-to-peer relationships and student advocacy. I believe in earlier episodes, we alluded to why those things are so important. So, I would tell you to go back to episode 3, where we're looking at the learning environment, episode 3 and 4, where we're looking at learning environment, episode 5, where we are talking about the importance of having teachers that look like you, and how changes in that learning environment can contribute to better relationships between students and staff, how being able to address what's going on outside of school can help with those peer-to-peer, student-to-student relationships. And also by bringing in teachers that may be stronger advocates for our Black students, that may hold them accountable at a higher level than some other students, how that's important. All those things kind of trickle down into what Dr. Briggs just had to say. So it seems like this group is talking about community district relationships, and it's talking about what I'm seeing as an evolution of the community center and the other things it has to offer, in making sure that community centers as a whole are working together to create that full enriched experience for those that attend. There's one other thing that I will leave you with before we get to our student shoutouts. I came across an article, an Education Post. It's an online publication that was, it's a little older than some of the other ones, but I think really outlines a number of things to think about. And when we started this episode, I said, hey, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ways of looking at what community's role is. And it's going to be a matter of prioritizing what needs to be addressed first. In this article, it outlines 10 ways communities can help close the achievement gap. And here's what they have listed. Number 1, community members with or without children of their own must attend board meetings. So we had a student that alluded to that parent-teacher relationship and how important that is. But let's not forget about the role of the school board and how important that is, and how it's important that the community is being involved in knowing what is going on and talking about the changes that are needed and advocating for those changes. Create a climate. Number 2, create a climate of high expectation. And I believe that is a combination of that kind of goes back a little bit into hiring diversity among your teachers. I think the increase of diversity will help raise and create a climate of higher expectations. 3, provide an academically challenging, multicultural curriculum. Goes back to diversity in the district, goes back to diversity among the teaching ranks, the administration ranks. 4, the community must provide supplementary academic programs for all children, not just underachievers, which may be able to be accomplished by the district and businesses and nonprofits, Black-led businesses and nonprofits collaborating and coming into the classroom and speaking and talking and providing opportunities for the students. 5, provide mentors for at-risk students. Mentorship, mentorship I've seen has been very strong here in Madison. I've seen that in a number of places, and at least from what I have been able to see, that has been something that has been a strength. Now there can always be more. It's better to have more mentors than not enough. But from what I've seen, that has been a strength. Provide preschool education for all children aged 3 to 5. That's a very important one. Involve high school students in community activities and service. I believe Mrs. LaShawn Whitmore-Sells was alluding to how, older students within the community center can find opportunities to give back and to mentor and to teach. 8, provide food, clothing, school supplies for families who are poor. I believe there's a number of organizations that step up and knock that out of the park every year. And I want to give, a congrats to them for the work that they're doing, and I hope they continue to do it. 9, solve problems that create school attendance difficulties, such as dangerous intersections, lack of sidewalks, high-speed traffic, things that scare or threaten kids traveling to and from school. An infrastructure problem. To the schools I've been, I'm not sure that is necessarily a major concern, but I could be wrong. But infrastructure has to be safe. And lastly, 10, promote alcohol and drug-free community events and activities while also discouraging gang activities. I believe the schools do a great job of that. So here are 10 things. As I told you, this article is from 2017, before the pandemic. And I do find it interesting that cross section of community centers and mental health was not a part, at least of this specific publication. And we found that came through loud and clear. And I do think with the type of political climate we've been in, with the social justice movement going on, with us coming out of a pandemic, that is something, as I said, that's new, that that is of great importance right now. And not that there weren't mental health issues before, but even more so now with what the kids have been through. I think that does need to be a matter of priority. All right. I want to thank you guys for listening in on episode 6, Community. What role can they play in closing the achievement gap? Now let's go ahead and get into our student shout out.
I would say, okay, my high school teacher, she was my health teacher, Miss Schleiter. When I was at La Follette, I was at a real rocky point in my life where, I was at a new school. I didn't mess with too many people. I didn't want to, I didn't know who I was. So, the teacher, we really got close. We just had a bond, and I just shout her out because, she was my friend. So, yeah, that's the person I shout out.
And what's her name?
Miss Becca. Her name is Becca Schleiter.
Thank you, Miss Schleiter, for everything you've done and continue to do in the district. We are very appreciative of everything that you have done and will continue to do. So thank you. This concludes episode 6, Community. What is their role in helping to close the achievement gap? Hopefully you've learned some things. You have some things to think about, and this move you possibly to action and to participate in different ways in the district, maybe that you haven't before. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure to check us out on social media at Pick Up the Mic Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We try and post some of the publications and things that we reference within the podcast on those social media spots. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you guys next week at 6 p.m. Until then, have a great one.